Hi and welcome to Rejection Chronicles, the only weekly vlog that comes out the most irregular intervals. People often say you have to have a brand if you want to succeed, so that's mine. So going by my vlog notes, this episode was supposed to be a deep dive straight into the disgusting query bog. But since the last episode was so long, kinda somber and rather shame-filled, I figured we all deserve something a bit lighter. So instead, this week I'm going to talk about how this whole joke of an adventure started for me. Why is it that I am so stubbornly trying to become a writer even though it's not going so well, and it's not been going well for over a decade now? And let me tell you, it started long before the book about the dear dimwits and the evil avatar going around adopting wolf puppies. So I've told you about the first book I've written, but it was not the first book I've started writing. The very first one, I was like 6 or 7 years old. It was called Przygody myszki Wronusi, which could be translated to Adventures of Wronusia the Mouse. And of course, it starred my own white mouse. A mouse which, by the way, was kind of a weird mouse. We got it because one time my mom came home from work and she brought a mouse that belonged to her co-worker. And that mouse was so lovely, it was so affectionate and friendly, and you could just play with it. It was just lovely. So of course my baby self was like, I need! Right? And since it was just a mouse, my mom was like, okay, we can get her the mouse, right? So I got a mouse. I called her Wronusia because the other mouse was called Wronek and mine was a girl. And my mouse was so dumb. Like, there are dumb mice. They are not the smartest. They are not rats, you know. But that mouse was just like, you didn't have any fun with it, right? But there is a but. If you don't have the brains, you might just have the brawn. And imagine that one time I'm just sitting on the computer playing some game or whatever with mom, and suddenly I look to the side because there was something on my peripheral vision, and lo and behold, there is a bloody mouse running there. I'm like, what the hell? It was about the time when Matrix was coming out and there was the white mice, so it was of course wahaha, funny, but at the same time, why is the mouse out, right? Why is it running on the carpet? So I pick up the mouse and I go to my room and see what the hell. And the mouse literally bent the cage wires to open it. And she just escaped. So I had a strongman mouse. And had I known before, I'm sure it would have made it into the book. But alas, I had to just use my imagination. So it featured such amazing plots as finding a mouse-sized dragon that was called like my dog, well, my grandmother's psychotic dog, whatever, a story for another time, and a lion that had a, splinter in his paw, and I guess he was also the size of a mouse or something, and there was some kind of river, and you know what? The saddest part about this thing is that it was actually better than my next book. Q, codename Syrenki, or mermaids. It was actually called Zaklęty Pierścień, which translates to Enchanted Ring, which alone can set the scene to how terrible and cliché of a story that was. It was about a girl who was trying to find her way in life, whatever, and she dreamt of becoming a mermaid. And of course, when she went to the seaside with her family, she went to the sea, and lo and behold, there were mermaids in there, and there was some handsome Triton, and they had a ring that let her become a mermaid. And I remember, my mom never liked to praise me for things that weren't good. She was always like, so that when I praise you, I'm actually being genuine, and that's fine and all. But when it came to the mermaid book, she was actively hating on me. She was my first real hater. She just suffered on this book, and she was just straight out, this is so bad, stop. It was my creativity dip into the abyss of suckage. I don't know. I still have that somewhere because I have recovered it. I was writing those books on this black and yellow kind of computer where I was just using my 2 fingers, and I somehow managed to save them, have the brain to save them before the laptop actually became unusable. But still, those are not exactly the things that made me want to become a writer. I was just writing since forever. It was kind of natural thing for me to do, to just write, but at that time it wasn't this kind of innate need that I have right now, that I've had for the past 2 decades of my life. I always had a very vivid inner life. It started with just the typical kind of imagination. I was the kid that could, take headphones and just imagine it's a horse and just make stories in my brain for myself and entertain myself for 2 hours on a train, just playing with the hooves. I still remember one time when I was in a primary school and I had a friend who was really into actual horses, and she had a lot of horse toys. And she was also learning how to horse ride and stuff. And I went to her home and we were supposed to play with the horses. And I remember I annoyed her pretty badly because she was trying to, make the horse ring and the stables and have the dolls ride on the horses as it's proper, like, they go like this, and she knew how you teach people to ride horses and how they do. And I came there and I was like, oh, the horse ran away, and went to the mountain. I don't remember, but I just shut all over her rules and I just started to make up some random gibberish bullshit, and she was like, stop! It was really funny, and it was so long ago. So it could be annoying to some people who wanted to actually have some structure to their entertainment, but we were good friends for a really long time after that, so all good there. I think the first time I've started to fall into the hole of actually getting lost in my head, in my imaginary worlds, whatever, was after playing Neverwinter Nights 1. I don't remember which quest it was or which characters those were because it was so bloody long ago, but I recall one of the storylines left me dissatisfied. I did not like how it went. I did not like the ending. I think the ending was kind of lacking. And I vividly remember lying down in my bed and I started to make up a different ending. And for the first time, that was the first time I think that I actually felt the story I was imagining, like on the very emotional level. And I became addicted to it. And when I say I became addicted, I don't kind of mean it lightly. A little bit later, I think it was maybe the same year, maybe the same month, it snowballed out of control. I began to have a story in my head. It was not a good story, it was not an original story, it was basically, you could say, a fan fiction based on Dungeons and Dragons Forgotten Realms kind of thing. It was spawned after reading some Dristo Arden, or however you pronounce his name, books. It was about some drow girl and elves and kingdoms, and it was horrible. It was, if you took all the Mary Sues in the world and all the most cliche, annoying fanfictions you can find, and if you merge them together, that's probably what you would get there. I never written it down though, so at least I had that going for me. Nobody else had to suffer through it. But for me, it was the main source of emotions for 4 years to come. I spent nearly every waking moment inside that world. I also used it to have fun with my friend. I was like, it was kind of like pen and paper RPGs, but I was mostly just, we didn't use any dice, we didn't have any character sheet. She just had her character, I had mine, that was the protagonist of the story, and we just played around, silly stories that, what do you do, what happens, this kind of thing, without any rules. It's nothing like that. We just had fun like teenage girls. But when I wasn't playing this with her, I was continuing the story in my brain, and I was always very excited to share it with her the next time we saw and, push the story forward. I was thinking of some sort of obstacles, events, characters, stuff like that, but for me, it was so much more. And I honestly think the only times I wasn't actively living that thing was when I was spending time with my mom or when I was playing some computer games. Other than that, I don't remember a ton of things that I've done outside of it. It was like I was riding in a car, I was there. I was sitting in the classroom, I was there. I was walking home, I was there. My friends were walking beside me. The moment they were talking and I was out of that conversation, I was there. I was just pushing it forward and forward and forward. And why I say I was addicted to it, because when my friend, for instance, when I wanted to share it with her and she was bored of it or she had something else to do, which is normal, we played a lot and she loved it for a really long time, but at some point you burn out if it's not something that horribly addicting to you. So I was still extremely into it and she was like, okay, we can play sometimes. And it was so bloody upsetting to me, like you cannot imagine. And I remember I was always calling her, like, when are you coming over? When are you coming over? Her brother was actually just joking, like, who's calling? Well, guess who's calling? And like, it's me again. I heard it once. I get it. They were right. But I could not control this. I was completely lost in the bloody thing. And we stopped playing after a while. And the story continued. I continued the story in my brain, for me, just for myself, and it was fine. Like once it was over with her, the game was over, I just moved on my own, and it was still so encompassing. I remember so very well. I was going to go to the middle school, so I was the primary school was over, and we were supposed to go and see the middle school I was supposed to go to. And my parents were, of course, pretty excited, like it's so European, and they had those, it was the time the European Union was a big thing, and we were just joining it. So the school was like European themed. It was not a very good school, but, when they present themselves, it looks much better than it actually is afterwards. It doesn't matter. I was supposed to change schools. It was a big moment in the child's life, in theory, right? And I remember I was lying in my bed and just, brain in the other world. And it was like minutes before we were going to that school, and I just didn't give a fuck. Like not a single fuck given. I just wanted to be there in my room and in my world, in my story world. And that was it. So, of course I went, because my parents took me, and we were walking through the school and stuff, and I was in my I was in my bloody head, in my bloody story, and that's how 4 years of my life went. And then suddenly the thing burned out and I was lost, completely, utterly lost. I remember I was in the shower just doing my absolute best to kind of rekindle this kind of emotional fire that those stories brought me, trying to make this spin-off, and I think for a week or two I managed to kind of sort of hold on to it, to get some more emotions out of it, but then it was just completely gone. And I've never got it back ever. But I started to feel the same emotional possibility in writing. Only ever since, and I think there was an overlap with my first book, as in I was already writing the book when the story was still alive in my head, but after it burned out, I kind of had to move all of this emotional need into my writing. And the difference was, I could never again feel the same thing without having a purpose behind it, as in tell a story that I will share with someone, write a book that will stay, do something that will, get out into the world. Why it stopped being so self-sufficient, I don't know, but it has been like this ever since. And still to this day, it's when I write, it's when I get into the story, it's when I get into the characters, the relationships, the drama, whatever they are going through. When I imagine the scenes, I usually just, go turn off all the lights, put on some music, and just get into it. And that is when I feel the most. That's when most of my emotions that I go through comes from. And I don't think it's healthy at all. I have tried to detach myself from it and be a little bit more present in real life, but I don't know how. And this is why I am this stubborn to be a writer. And it's not because I love literature, it's not because I love writing. Honestly, there are many times when I don't like writing. It doesn't bring me much pleasure. I get pleasure from conceptualizing it, from making up those stories, from imagining the scenarios, perfecting them, solving the problems. Right now the plots are of course way more complicated and they are no longer cheap fan fiction. But if I could just plug my brain to some kind of machine that would create animations out of it, that's fine by me. It could be comic books, it could be anything. The medium doesn't matter to me, that's my point. It's just that writing the books, that they are most achievable. They are the only achievable thing, because if you wanted to tell stories like that by drawing them, well, good luck, I'll see you in 100 years. There's just something in this kind of emotional, fictional reality that appealed to me so much. I preferred it over real life. It was a fantasy, it was safe, it was controlled. It was predictable, even if my brain was always surprising me with this or that, I always had control over it. And I always had this need that I can't free myself from, to have something magical in my life, something different, something unique, something bigger than reality, even though reality is huge. And on the intellectual level, I understand it. I understand that life is so immensely complicated that no fiction could ever measure up to it. But ever since I was a little child, it was always, I want to be an elf. I want to be an X-Men. I was leaving notes under my pillow, asking fictional characters like even Professor Xavier from X-Men to make me an X-Men, I was really small. I don't do that nowadays. Keep that in mind. And it was like I wanted to be a vampire, I wanted to be some kind of spirit, a ghost. Well, maybe not a ghost, I never wanted to die and be a ghost, but just something different, not human. I never ever could stomach playing human in games, even, because it was just so mundane and my entire being rebelled against it. And I guess that's why I fell into it so hard. And speaking of not caring if I am writing or imagining animations in the future, there was a time I also wanted to be an actress, but of course it couldn't work. Because I didn't want to be an actress to be an actress. I didn't want to be an actress because I have high appreciation of the craft and I just wanted to play and stuff and, explore this craft. I wanted to be an actress to play in very specific kinds of things that would let me escape to this different reality again. So no slice of life things, no theaters, no nothing, just fantasy and science fiction movies. It was always about searching like that. That's why I never dreamt about, for instance, being a singer, because that was too little, right? You go to the stage, you sing, but you don't get to be someone else. And whenever I was making those stories in my head, be it the 4 years of fanfiction or any other kind of small 1-2 days imaginary scenario, it was never about me. I never had a self-insert in those. It was never like the world of whatever and then I get there somehow and I do stuff. I always left myself at the door. When I was going to my 4 years fanfiction, I left myself at the door and I followed a character that was in there. And this is a random, silly fact about me. The character in the longest fanfiction was called Ariadna. And no, I did not name her after myself. I named myself after her. And no, I'm not joking. I am actually not kidding. And every time I talk about this, it feels really weird. Maybe it's not weird nowadays. People do crazier things. But at that time, to me it was really crazy, but it was something I really wanted so bloody much. It meant so much to me. It was, in a way to keep that story that disappeared alive, kind of like keeping a memento of it. Even though I couldn't go there and leave myself at the door anymore, I could at least, shove that name change in there and keep the door just a little open so that I could, peek into the past, something like that. And to this day, I don't know how I got the courage to ask my parents to let me do that. I don't think I would get this courage anymore. But it tells me how much my 16-year-old self cared. To be able to do something she knew was extremely silly and extremely weird, because here at that time it was extremely weird and just a really extremely goofy choice that I don't know, but I've never regretted it, not for a single second. And I like that I've done it. And I like what it says about my 16-year-old self. And I'm honestly proud of her. And I know it all begs a question. Why did I miss half my life by escaping into my head? First into imaginary stories that I never written down, and then into the plots of my books. And I don't know. I really don't know. I had a very good childhood. I had no reason to try to escape from it. I never ever wanted to escape from my home. I didn't even rebel like most teenagers do. It's really hard to say. I have spent a lot of time trying to understand why that happened. And sometimes I thought like maybe the fairy tales I've been read as a child kind of, I don't know, did something to my head where I stopped being able to accept reality for what it was and always needed to have that magic in. But that's weird because normal children don't react to fairy tales like that. But that was the only thing I could think of. And I wonder if that could be the case. But if it's so, then the fairy tales kind of messed me up for life, I'm afraid, because I am almost 30 and still like that. I still get the biggest emotional response to imaginary things that I produce in my head. Luckily, it's not like I don't have any response to things that happen around me, but it makes me reclusive, it makes me disinterested in social life, disinterested in a lot of activities I could be doing in real life, going out, hanging in the bars. I just get bored there. There is no magic. And I wish it wasn't so, because it would make life easier, and I can't even use this to become a writer, right? And it's very frustrating because all this time I thought that I have, sacrificed a lot of what normal teenagers and normal young adults do. They go to parties, they just have this vibrant social life. There is a lot of stuff they do, right? They go to some volunteers and they go camping and they go to music festivals. And I never had interest in any of this. I wanted to stay home and write and just submerge myself in my imagination waters. And I thought that at least I could take all of this creativity, emotional needs, whatever, and turn it into a career. But as you know, it's not happening. So that's a bummer. And I was supposed to make it a light, fun episode, but I guess since you're watching Rejection Chronicles, you can kind of expect it. And speaking of rejection, since there was not a lot of rejection this time, I can actually inject a miniature rejection story into this, because actually why I got to recording this episode today is because in my notes I had written something and I saw an announcement on YouTube that reminded me of it, and I was like, fine, I'll do the bloody vlog right now. And the announcement concerns Baldur's Gate 3, which was, well, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 were my most favorite games. They was like, the amount of emotions I had. I never got into the, imaginary expansions of Baldur's Gate because that game was so satisfying to me emotionally. I never had a need. Instead I just replayed it 20 times. And it was so important to me as a child. It was like if I had two things that were my emotional pillars of childhood, it would be my fan fiction thing and Baldur's Gate here, right? And I know this game inside and out. I learned English using that game. And now third part is coming out, right? You may know about this, you may not know about this. It's made by Larian Studios, who also made the Divine Divinity series. Sorry if I messed up the name. And I found their forums and I was like, okay, this will be the biggest crapshoot ever. But I'm just gonna go to this forum, I'm going to find some member of the development team, and I'm just gonna write and be like, please let me voice something in this game, I will do it for free, I will go to a professional studio, I'll pay for it, just let me be a part of the third part of something that was so monumental to me. I wrote this whole, essay about what this game means to me. And he was like, sorry, we can't, because, I'm not fucking there. They are in Ireland or whatever, some other country, or maybe Canada, or... I knew at the time, but then I erased it from my memory because it sucked too much. And they will just go to some studio to hire professional actors, because that's what professional game studios do, and it bloody sucks. Because I really was willing to just, go out of my way and I didn't want to get money for it. I just wanted to participate somehow. And this was the one thing I could offer. And it didn't work out, so there is my rejection story for today. And I saw this announcement on YouTube, the gameplay announcement thingy, thumbnail, and I got just so salty. So salty. And then people wonder why I escaped to my imaginary worlds. Such things wouldn't happen in my imaginary world. They would go like the best anime where I write this message and they say yes, and then I do it and it's glorious and it's fun, and then I get to play this game and see like, yeah, after all these years I put my brick into the creation of this thing and it's so exciting. But nah, that's not real life, man. Real life is like, no sorry, we will just hire professional actors from a studio nearby. Okay, so I don't want to end this on another bummer. So, you know what struck me? A thought struck me lately. If I was growing up now, if I was like 13 today, and I had the internet, I think I might have been an otherkin. Like seriously, think about it. I was so convinced I didn't belong into the human race. I wanted to be an elf. I was honestly believing I would get elf ears by 11 when I turned 11 because reasons. I just really wanted to believe that, and I was just so into all of that stuff and into believing it. I'm pretty sure I would be the prime victim of the otherkin movement. They would just suck me up and I would be there and I would be like, I am actually an elf. It just doesn't look like it. And I'm glad I didn't grow up in this time. Well, that's a bullet dodged, isn't it?